Tēnā koutou, e tēnā e hiahi. Hi, I'm Marcus Bristol, and thanks a lot for coming to my talk today, Moving Fast. Now, I've screwed up, and my talk hasn't even started yet. So what I thought I would do, I'm from New Zealand, and I thought I'll get some New Zealand candy, something that's world famous in New Zealand, bring it to Australia and get you to try it as a thank you for coming along to the talk today. Turns out I couldn't find pineapple lumps anywhere. Pineapple lumps are really, really common, really popular in New Zealand. And I must have gone to about half a dozen shops before I found any. And so I grabbed every single packet they had off the shelf. And then I was really happy. I flew over to Australia, and the very first shop that I went into had pineapple lumps on the wall. I did some research, and it turns out pineapple lumps are now being manufactured in Australia and being sent back to New Zealand. So Australians have stolen our pineapple lumps as well as our pavlova. Just out of curiosity, who here has had pineapple lumps before? Quite a few. Who have had Jaffas before? Still quite a few. Who really like it when the speaker asks you to put up your hands? I've got a few. I'll keep going then. All right, so I put some pineapple lumps and some Jaffas down there anyway. Hopefully it'll save the day. So help yourself on the way out. Before I get started, I'm just going to tell you a little story that happened to me on the weekend. Just it's going to set the scene, I think, for the rest of the talk today. So my wife and I arrived in the country on Saturday, and those who are here on Saturday, it was a really, really hot day. It was amazing weather. So we thought that on Sunday we'll go whale watching. So the idea is you hop on a cruise, you have a feed, and then you go out to the open water and you watch some whales for a couple of hours. You know, that sounds amazing, right? So we did that, hopped on the boat, had the feed, that was really good. And then we went out in open waters, but it was really, really wavy. Right, I was up the top and I was really enjoying it. I have never ever been seasick. You know, I can handle the water perfectly fine. And I was standing at the top of the stairs and I was looking right down the bottom, and there was a family down the bottom who were being affected by the water, shall we say. They were being sick. And I was laughing at them, thinking, it's never going to happen to me. 15 minutes later, fate had its revenge. And I was starting to feel really queasy. So I went downstairs, because it wasn't quite so rocky down there, and I thought, let's hope that I get over this. But I didn't. A couple of minutes later, I rushed into the bathroom, and I started being sick into the basin there. Now, how many of you have seen those horror movies where somebody hears a noise in the drain, and they go and put their head over the basin, and then all of a sudden all this blood and stuff comes out? Right, so I had my head over the basin, I was chundering, I was trying to wash it all down discreetly, and then something happened to the pipework, and all this air and everything came back up, along with all my sick, and it just went all over my face and all over my shirt and all over the wall. It was just a mess. Right at that moment, a crewmate picked up behind me and said, look, you can't be sick down here, you got to get back upstairs. And so I'm trying to deal with this, I'm trying to clean up the mess. I've got this guy nagging me to get back upstairs. It was awful. So I eventually got in a state and I crawled back up the stairs, managed to get to the top, and I looked down the boat and just everybody was being sick. Everyone had sick bags, all being sick in sick bags. There were people outside of the boat chundering over the edge. The sick bags were all the way down the back, and I had to try and weave my way around without being sick again to try and get the safety of a sick bag. And so what turned into an awesome cruise became the boat of hell. This is a photo I wish I'd taken. I just grabbed this off the internet. I'm really looking forward to doing it again next year. But anyway, you're here to hear about Pushpay. It's a company I work for, about how we managed to make a lot of changes really quickly and have very few production defects. So Pushpay we provide a way for people to make donations to churches and charities. So essentially we're a payment system, but in a very, very niche market. We provide a whole bunch of other utilities and things for them to support it, but primarily we're a payment system. Pushpay also loves ponies. So I've got some pony stickers over there. I've got a big pony on my back. If you have any questions at all about the talk, go and find someone wearing a pony and ask them about it, and they'll help you out. Right, over the last few years, Pushpay have been in the state of hypergrowth. So this is a chart of our revenue growth over the last 6 years. It doesn't really matter what the numbers are, but you can see the trend. It's going up like this. Right, so I asked a colleague of mine to look at other parts of the business and see how that was doing, and to provide me with a graph of the growth that they're going at the moment. So this is what he gave me. Highly detailed graph of other parts of the business, but as you can see, it's all in exponential growth. So we are working under this. We're constantly evolving, we're constantly changing, but we're still a payment system, right? We need to be very, very careful about what we put into production. We are really, really risk adverse. You know, at the end of the day, we're dealing with people's money. If we accidentally double bill someone, that has real world consequences, you know, to the effect that they may not be able to pay their bills. Conversely, if we don't bill them, that again has real world consequences to our direct clients, the churches, and they may not be able to pay their bills. You know, so we need to be really careful about the changes that we're making. Not only that, because we're dealing with credit cards, we're dealing with money and bank accounts, we've got a high level of security, and we need to be extra careful not to violate that. Now, our application is a monolith application. It's been around for a few years now, and basically what we do is we just grab this monolith and we just dump it in production. So we just pick it up and go, and we do this possibly every hour or so. So how do we do this? How do we survive in this hypergrowth environment, making all these constant changes in a CI/CD type environment, and yet still be really risk-free? So this is where I was going to do a mic drop and walk off the stage, but I had my joke stolen from me by Dylan yesterday. I am not bitter at all. All right, so today I'm going to talk about three things. First, I'm going to talk about our culture and how that underpins everything we do. I'm going to go through some of the processes that are built upon that culture. The culture enables us to do these processes. And then I'm going to go through some of the automation, you know, that we've put together in place to take away all the boring parts. Because if we've got to constantly do the boring parts, and then this is not going to work. But before I do that, I'm going to tell you another story. Now, this story is one that employers don't really like me telling, but they're not here, so I'm going to do it anyway. I'm a senior engineer at Pushpay, and I've got quite a lot of responsibility there. I make changes to the platform, I deploy those changes, I monitor those changes once they're in production. You know, I've got quite a lot of responsibility there. And I've been working there for about 4 years now as a senior engineer. About 30 years ago, I was a thief. So it wasn't, that sounds worse than what it is, right? I didn't rob people, I didn't go into people's houses and steal their things. But every Friday night, my mates and I used to go to town and we used to shoplift. And we would steal candy bars and snack foods and things. It wasn't anything major, but it was a lot. You know, we'd go and we would fill up these bags, and halfway through the night we'd go and empty out the bags, go back and start again. And this went on for months and months and months. You know, until the inevitable happened and we were caught. Thankfully, when we were caught, we only had a chocolate bar, so there wasn't that much on us at the time. But the policeman took us down to the police station and gave us a tour of the jail cells. Now, we were three, 15-year-old pimply little kids, and we were terrified. You know, we thought we were going to go to prison. And eventually, they let us off. They did tell our parents, so we were still in for a world of hurt, but we didn't have any long-term consequences from that. But that was my first real-world introduction to what I've become known as just culture. So Sidney Dekker talks about just culture a lot. I'm going to quickly cover some of the highlights today, but if you want to know more, go and check out Sidney Dekker's website. I'll put it up at the end for you so that you can see it. And he goes really in depth into a lot of the processes that they do. So essentially, just culture is a culture of trust, of learning, and of accountability. People need to have trust in the stuff that I do, and I need to have a reciprocal trust in what they do. And together, we need to collaboratively learn and improve. At the same time, we all need to be accountable for any changes, any decisions that we make. It's a way to be able to balance safety and accountability. I mean, essentially, at the end of the day, it's a culture that allows the boss to hear bad news. Now, if something bad happens, you need to be able to have the courage or be able to go and tell your boss that this bad thing has happened without fear of repercussion, knowing that you're going to go and fix it. The version of just culture that I experienced when I was 15 is a retributive just culture. And so what that looks at is what rule is broken, who broke that rule, how bad was that breach, and what should the consequences be for that particular breach, and finally, who gets to decide this. So in my case, the rule that was broken was stealing. And it was quite obvious who did it. I was the one holding the chocolate bar as I left the store. How bad was the breach? Luckily for me, at the time, I only had this one chocolate bar, so the breach was quite small, and therefore the consequences were quite small. If they caught me with this huge bag, and then I think it would have been a very different story. And in this case, who gets to decide it is essentially the law of the land, the elected officials, or in this case, the policeman that I was dealing with. But it doesn't always have to be a threat of a jail sentence or anything like that. It could be as simple as a school kid getting caught smoking behind the bike sheds and maybe given a detention. I had another really interesting case at a previous company that I worked for. For a period of time, we had a high rate of incidences in production. And they decided a good way to resolve that is to associate it with your bonus. And so what they said is that if more than 10% of your changes causes a production defect, and then that's going to directly impact your bonus. Now the idea behind this is that people were then given the incentive to take more care about their work, make sure it's tested thoroughly, make sure that everything went okay when it went into production. But what it actually did was generate fear of making change. And the engineers soon realized that if they don't deploy anything, all right, and then they're going to come under that threshold and they were going to get a bonus, and that's exactly what happened. So the number of deployments went down that year, less than 10% defects, and everybody got a bonus. But for that year, we had a very slow rate of change in production. And we want to encourage the opposite. We want to encourage a high rate of change, but in a safe way. A retributive culture essentially meets hurt with hurt. All right, so it says, if you're going to do this bad thing, and then you're going to be faced with this punishment, if you're going to go and rob a bank, for example, and then you're going to have the risk of a jail sentence. And so it puts up this threat, and then when you decide whether or not you're going to do this thing, you then assess the risk of what you want to do it. But at Pushpay, we work under a restorative culture. A restorative culture, something goes wrong, it looks at who is hurt, what do they need to fix it, whose obligation is it to meet that need, and more importantly, how do you involve the community in that conversation? So while the most important thing for us to do is to go and fix that issue, fix our customers and make sure that everyone is okay, if one person does that on their own, and then there's very limited value on that, we need to bring the community in and spread that learning so that everybody can improve as a result of that. I have another story that I probably shouldn't tell in a public forum like this. It's about my boss. My boss isn't here, so I should be okay. So when I started at Pushpay, it was the end of 2014, and I'd been there a couple of weeks. And my boss was doing some work in a BI database, running some reports or something. Now what we did is we would take a copy of production database, dump it into our BI database so that we can run reports. We did this fairly regularly. But because we have a PCI compliance, because we're dealing with credit cards, we've got a high level of security, we couldn't have any personally identifiable information in our BI database. So we had to sanitize the data on its way to BI. So that if we're looking at the numbers and stuff, we couldn't associate that with any particular person. Now my boss was in the BI database, he's running those reports, and he happened to notice that it wasn't sanitized. And so this was violating our PCI compliance. So in a panic, he went and ran the sanitization script to clean it up. And that's when he realized two things. The first, he was not in the BI database. It was in production. And secondly, the script that we had, the safety guard in the script we had didn't work in production. All right? We tested that script in dev, in staging, in sandbox. We tested it everywhere we could, but not in our production environment, just in case. And it turns out that our production environment was configured slightly differently, so that guard clause didn't work. And instead of getting fired, I mean, he's still my boss today, and instead of getting fired, we came together as a team, came together as a community, and we healed it. We healed that hurt. We found out how can we fix this, and we got together and fixed the damage. And a result of that is one of our most important changes that have happened at Pushpay. And that's you never ever do anything alone. No matter what you do, you always have a co-pilot, you always have a partner to help you do it. And that learning came from that particular incident. So even though it was a bad thing at the time, that has formed quite a strong basis for our culture going forward. So essentially a restorative culture meets hurt with healing. You know, we find out how do we fix this? How do we help people? And that becomes our priority. And the way we do that is through a process called a blameless post-mortem. NDC came up with this, and we borrowed it from them, and we've adapted to our needs. And what it entails, or what it lets us do, is it lets the engineers give a detailed event of what actions they took at what time, what effects they observed when they took those actions, and what expectations they had. Because generally, the cause of an issue is the expectation doesn't match what actually happened. All right, and it also, they write down any assumptions that they had. Because generally nobody has full, complete knowledge of something. They're always making some kind of assumptions along the way. And they put down their understanding of the timeline of events that led up to it. Most importantly, they can do this, they can give this detailed account without fear of punishment or of retribution. There is no blame at all associated with this. It's just a statement of fact. So when do we do one of these? Whenever there is an opportunity to learn. If we can learn from this, we will do it. And it doesn't matter if it's resulting from a production incident or from an MS, say something happens in our QA environment. If we can learn from it, and then we'll do a blameless post-mortem. And that allows us to fix any breaches, any potential ways to cause an issue. Now this is done in a written format rather than spoken format. We use Slack a lot. And so Slack is one of the ways we discuss this, and then it gets formalized into a Confluence article, and then it gets reported to the board. And the reason we do it in a written format is to give everyone a voice. So if you have a meeting, and generally the larger meetings are worse, the extroverts, the people with the loud voices tend to dominate the meeting, while the quiet people, who generally always have something that needs to be said, are sitting there quietly. By having it in a written form, it means everybody has a voice. Now I'm going to quickly go through and show you an example of one. This happens to be an accidental sanitization of our production database on the 1st of the 10th, 2014. I'm not going to give you full details. Most of it's going to be blurred out, but I'm going to give you enough information so that you can get an idea and see how we do it and see what's going on. So the first thing we do at the top is we have a summary, and then we just have a short paragraph that gets reported to the board. This is what happened. This is what the cause was. And then we'll put together a timeline of events that happened. And again, this is who did what and when they did it. And it's just a statement of fact. There's no blame or anything at all associated with this. And then we'll do an impact assessment. So we'll find out who's been hurt by this and how we can help them recover from it. Once everybody is okay, and once everybody's healed, we'll have a discussion about what's happened. And this is often done in Slack. And we'll find out what the cause was, you know, what happened, why did this happen, and how can we stop this from happening again. And then we'll put together, create a list of mitigations. So these are effectively just JIRA tickets. So essentially it becomes technical debt. But they become our highest priority work items. They become more important than the project work that we're doing. Because if something happens once, that's fine, you know, things happen. If it happens again, and then people start to question, you know, what's going on? Do we actually know what we're doing? And so it's really simple. It's just a Confluence article. It's something that gets reported back to the board, and it gives a clear indication of what's happening. All right, now I've just said that we do this in a written rather than spoken format. We are constantly evolving. So as a company, we're constantly learning, we're constantly improving. And what we discovered that when we did this post-mortem, the main emphasis was to do the post-mortem to come up with the mitigations. And that's wrong. The mitigation should be the outcome or the artifact of it. The intention of doing your post-mortem is for the learning, is to find out what happened and to improve. So what we're doing now, we're trialing a facilitated blameless post-mortem, very similar to a retrospective, I guess, where we have somebody running the post-mortem, and that person gives everybody in the room a chance to have a voice, to have a say, what happened. And then that all gets collated, and then that gets put into the Confluence article. So we're doing this for a couple of months now, and so far it's been working really, really well. And so that culture, that forms a bedrock. Everything is built upon that. If we didn't have that, and then we wouldn't be able to do what we do. But to enable that, we need to have some processes that sit on top of that, and to help us do the work, to be able to get that velocity, to constantly get those changes into production. So I'm going to go through a few of our processes, a few of our techniques to be able to get a speed of change into production. So the first thing I want to talk about is feature flags. Everyone here familiar with feature flags? That's what I thought. There's an awesome talk straight after this by Andy. Is Andy here? Andy, I'm not going to your talk then. Straight after this, in the next room, he's going to talk about feature flags, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I recommend going to see that. Today, I'm just going to quickly run through how we do it at Pushpay. But I never used feature flags before Pushpay. And that's probably one of the most liberating things that I've learned while being there. Not only does it allow us to make incremental changes to the feature, have it in production but off in production, it also means that when you turn it on and something does happen, because of the nature of the changes, the way that you've coded it, you can very easily turn it back off and then relax and then go and fix the process. So our platform is primarily C# platform, but we do have a bunch of JavaScript, as everyone does. And this is essentially our JavaScript implementation of it. It was a bit easier to demonstrate than our C# one. So I have this awesome feature here. It prints out hello world to the console. And I want to update that. I want to update that production code to do my shiny new thing. So what I'll do is I'll go and add a new feature called my shiny new thing. And that goes and updates my configuration files. So you can see here that this is my development configuration file. It's got a new my shiny new thing feature in there, and it's turned on. In my production one, it's exactly the same, but it's turned off. And in my test one, it's the same again, but it's turned off. And then we can go into the code base, and we can start to implement the changes. So the first thing that we'll do is we'll duplicate that code, and we'll wrap it in an if statement. Okay, so this immediately violates the dry principle. Don't repeat yourself. But we don't care. We do this on purpose, because what that enables us to do is to go and clean up the feature flags later on in a risk-free manner. So we violate that principle on purpose. Then we go and wrap it up in the feature flag. So now in this state, the block at the top is the new production code, and the block on the bottom is the old production code. So as long as we don't touch that old stuff, and then we're good. And that means we can go and update the top code, update the top block, and we're all good. Okay, so now I've got my new application there. Let's pretend I've shipped it to production. And I'm going to quickly run it. And you can see here that we've still got the hello world come out. That's still the old stuff. If we take a look at the environment variable, it's currently sitting in the production environment. So I'm just going to switch over to dev so that I can show off my shiny new toy. All right, so I'm in dev. If I run it now, we've got my shiny new thing come out. If we quickly check test environment, we still got the old one. And if we test our production environment, we still got our old one again. All right, so that allows us to iterate on that feature and slowly get changes into production. So we do a trunk-based development, and that allows us to get changes in continuously. We've been trialing a thing called Science. It was a concept that GitHub have been trialing. It's an extension of the feature flags, and it's for production critical code that you want to refactor, but you don't necessarily want to change. And so what that will do is that will feature flag it, and that will run both the old code and the new code. The old code is the one that will be used in the production environment, but it will generate logs of the differences. So if, for example, if you have refactored it for performance reasons, the logs will detail any performance improvement, and it will also detail any differences in the output. So we can do this, and we can run it in production like that for a week or so until we get confidence that our refactoring hasn't broken anything, and then we can switch it over and turn on the new one, and then run it again for a while and just make sure that everything's okay before we get rid of the old stuff. So of course, this sounds very much like a unit test, right? So this is for slightly more complicated areas of code that the unit test can't necessarily cover. If it's dealing with production data, for example, that can be quite hard to simulate at times. So we've been trialing this. It's been working quite well, but it's got a limited area that we can use it. So we mainly use feature flags for what we do. We work in lots of small PRs. So we use GitHub, and we'll create a pull request in GitHub, and that pull request would only last a day on average. So we would make our change, and then at the end of the day, we would merge it back into the trunk. And of course, this is where the feature flags come in and allow us to do that. Everybody has probably experienced long-lived feature branches. So if you're working on a feature and you're using feature branches, and it could be a couple of months before you merge that back in, so you end up with a merge hill at the end, and the end result, once you've got that all fixed up, is something brand new that needs to be tested again from scratch. By doing this, by iterating in small chunks like this, that allows us to continuously test against production code, and we don't end up with that merge hill at the end, and we end up with a fully tested application at the end of it. We do warming. Has anyone heard of warming? No one? Has anyone heard of Works on My Machine? A few people. So at a previous company that I worked at, we used warming a lot. So as an engineer, what I would do is I'd code my change, I'd throw it over the fence, give it to the testers, and then I'd get onto the new fun thing. They would then test it, and they'll come back and say, hey, look, your change doesn't work. And I'd be like, worked on my machine. You know, I wasn't interested anymore, I was working on the new stuff. At Pushpay, we kind of claimed this and use it as our own. And what we do, and this is we do pair testing. Right, so we'll grab a QA, and they'll sit next to you, and then we'll test it together. At Pushpay, the engineer is the one who's responsible for the quality of the feature. We need to ensure that it's been tested to a high enough standard. The QA's role is to help us to do that, because generally, as engineers, we're rubbish at testing. So they give us guidance on how to do it, but we are, in the end, we were responsible for testing it. And so works on my machine means exactly that. It means it works. Generally, it means that when you merge it into the main branch, when it goes into QA, your feature works because you've tested it on your machine. Not only that, if there is a bug, Normally you can fix it in a couple of minutes. So you just grab the keyboard, you quickly fix it, even while the QA is still there, and then you go and test it again. And often after that it works. So it's a really, really quick turnaround on bug fixes. Every line of code that we write, every line of code that goes into production, gets code reviewed at least twice. All right, so the first time, it gets code reviewed by somebody in your team. So we work in small teams, normally about eight or so people. You'll work on your PR. At the end of the day, whenever, you will ask somebody in your team to go and do a code review of it. More often than not, especially in mine, it will come back with questions. So we're not just looking for things that don't work, things that are broken. Partly we're looking for things that we can learn from it. And we'll comment on it and say, hey, that's a really good idea, I never thought of doing that, or that's a really neat feature, that's pretty cool, I might try to do that. So we'll comment on it with things that we've learned from it. We'll put questions on it. If we don't understand why a decision was made, why did you do this? It's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just helping us learn and improve from it. If we do see something bad, of course, we'll comment on that in a very nice, polite way. But often, a PR will come back with questions on it, and that will generally start a conversation. Right? So it's not always a bad thing. You'll sit down with the reviewer and you have a conversation about it and explain why you made certain decisions, why you did things a certain way. Often the PR won't need any change. They'll say, yeah, that's fine, and then it'll go through. Sometimes it will, and then you'll make the changes and you'll do it again. Resubmit it for a code review, and normally it'll hopefully pass after that. The second code review is done during a process we call pollination. When I started, we were one big team, and the team got bigger and bigger, and we had like daily stand-ups, as you do, and the daily stand-ups were like taking all morning to get through. And so we split off into these small teams, but a result of splitting off into these small teams is you ended up getting isolated, and you're working on your own features, and you didn't know what anybody else was doing. And we needed a way to share learning amongst the team. And that's where we came up with pollination. So when you merge your change into the master branch, it will automatically assign somebody from outside of your team to come and do a code review of your changes. And that helps share features between the different teams, and it helps share knowledge between the different developers so that we all know what we're working on, we all share common skills. You normally have about a week or so to do the pollination, because this code is now on its way to production. And if it's too much longer than that, and then it starts to lose value, because if there are any issues with it, more than likely they'll get fixed and you're going to be looking at old code. So there is kind of a time limit to when this should be done. But we found it really, really useful for knowledge sharing amongst the teams. We do automated testing. I imagine most people here do. It's just a thing these days. We run hundreds of thousands of tests in our QA environment. Unit tests, integration tests, API tests, Selenium tests. We run this cool thing that I really like. It's a visual difference thing. So we have a snapshot of what our screens looked like, and we take another snapshot of what they look like now, compare them. I find CSS very easy. It's one of the easiest languages to use. I also find CSS very hard. It's one of the hardest languages to use. And you make a change here, it's going to break something down there. So I find it to be a really good safety net. But yeah, we do hundreds of these tests. That means when something is going through QA, we don't do happy path testing at all. We rely on automated tests. We do exploratory testing, edge case testing. We're actually trying to break the thing, which is a lot more fun. We do a lot of monitoring. We have thousands of metrics coming out of our system every second, monitoring everything that we're doing, from business concerns like number of payments going through the system, to operational concerns like CPU stats, page life expectancy in the database, a whole bunch of stuff. And then we can follow these trends in the graphs. We also put alerts on it. So for example, if you do a deployment and all of a sudden the number of payments drops down to 0, somebody is going to get told about that pretty quickly. Right, and we have bots. We do a lot of automation as much as we can. I love working on bots. Bots are fun. I'm going to quickly go through a highlight of some of our bots now. It's going to kind of follow this to a certain degree. and give an idea of how we've been able to automate some of the processes to enable us to do this. All right, so the first one I'm going to look at are mitigation. So you remember when we do a post-mortem, the outcome of that are mitigations or items that we need to work on, which practically are JIRA tickets. And unless you're going and monitoring JIRA all the time, you are going to forget about these. We could implement a process where, say, our manager goes in and has a look daily at these JIRA tickets and then comes and taps you on the shoulder. But given that we're all engineers, we're not going to take too kindly to that. If we can automate that and have a bot do that, and then that's going to, we're not going to argue with the bot. We'll probably just ignore it, but we're not going to argue with the bot, right? And so that's what we've done. So we created a bot that will go and look in JIRA, find any mitigation tickets, and then just put the alert in the channel with your name. And this gets really, really annoying because it pings you every day. And so you should go and look at these. And the best way to get rid of them is to go and do those tickets. Excuse me. A question I get asked a lot about feature flags is when we do these feature flags, we turn it on in production, and then we've got all this dead code in there. How do we get rid of the dead code? Does it just stay there? Does it rot? And there's a very real risk for doing that. And at some stage we were doing that. We're putting more and more feature flags in there. We weren't cleaning them up because we couldn't see them. We had no visibility of them really. So we created a bot that will go and find any feature flags that have been on in production for more than 30 days, and then it will come and put it, display them in your team channel. So in this case here, my team, this was a while ago now, we had 43 feature flags that were on in production, and we needed to get rid of them. So by having these reminders, it reminds us that we need to go and clean up dead code in production. But I think a more important one than this is this one here. So sometimes you turn a feature on in QA, it's still off in production, and then you might get reassigned onto something else, or you might get sidetracked, or there could be a timing thing. You might not be able to turn it on for a particular amount of time. And so we end up in the state where you don't know what's happening, because it's on in dev, it's on in QA, and it's off in production. Do we need to go and turn it on in production? Is that the right thing to do? Or do we need to go and get rid of it because we don't need it anymore? And you don't really know what state it is. I don't know if you can read that number there, but that top one is 951 days old, which is a little bit embarrassing. We've fixed that one up now, just as FYI. But these ones are in an unknown state, so these are, in my opinion, are by far more important. We need to go and get these cleaned up so that we can have the system in a consistent state. The other ones are fairly mechanical. We're just going through and deleting dead code. This one needs a lot more thought around how do we deal with these. Should they be on? What's happening? Without the flaggy McNag face telling us about it though, it would go unknown. We wouldn't know what's happening. It's also a problem, of course, when you're testing something and it's on in QA and you're testing it in an on state, but it's off in production, and you get this disconnect and you don't know what's happening. Our code review process is kind of similar. Like if you need to go and have someone do a code review of your PR, how do we do that? How do we pick some random person and go tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, can you look at my code? So we use automation for that as well. And we do this via the use of labels in GitHub. So when your PR is ready for review, we'll go and put on a ready for review label onto that PR, and that will trigger this notification into your team Slack channel. And then somebody on your team will pick it up and then go and look at it. Now, as engineers at Pushpay, our mandate is not to write code. Our mandate is to deliver value to the customer. Doing code reviews is equally as important as writing code. So nobody shirks from this. Everybody will jump on this and they'll go and do it. I've experienced it in other companies where code reviews, they can be kind of boring. It's not your work you're looking at, and so they get left till last. These are really important to us, and we do get them done. They deliver a lot of value to the business. And as I said, normally there's a question on it, especially mine. I normally screw something up. And so they will put some comments in it and then mark us a question that'll get put into the channel. It'll notify me so that I know to go and look at it. I'll go and fix up my mistakes, mark it as ready for review again. Somebody, doesn't have to be the same person, but somebody in your team will pick it up. They'll go and look at it and then we're good. They'll put a ready to land label on it and then we're good to go into production. Very similar thing with pollination. If you get assigned a ticket, you need to know about it. So we have a DM from Vody McShipface, who will let you know, give you notification that a PR has been assigned to you. So this is from somebody outside your team. In a way that's harder to go and tap somebody from someone outside your team and say, hey, can you have a look at my PR? By automating it, that makes it really easy. They'll go and review it, like I say, within a few days and put on some comments and remove the pollination label, and then that will trigger this message come out. So it will let me know that my PR has been pollinated, and it has a list of items in here. So you can see in this one here, it's just a device. It's like, perhaps check out this logging thing. It might be a better configuration. You might make use of it. So it's not always a bad thing. It's more knowledge sharing. Again, we're going to forget about pollinations. If we don't keep on top of them, where do we go and check for them? We're not going to go through all the GitHub PRs and find any that's assigned to us and proactively look at it. Writing code is often more fun. You're always right in the middle of something. So again, we have a nag come up that will go and remind us to do it. And as you can see here, this one here is a wee bit late, 14 days late. And so the Bebot gets a wee bit aggressive. And he'll notify me, and he'll put some hinty emoji around it to tell me to go and hurry up and get that pollination done. I totally left it 14 days specifically for this talk. All right, automated tests. I mentioned before, we've got loads of automated testing. We have a ton of different test suites, and they're scattered all over the place. Back in the day, what we'd do is we would ship something into our QA, our staging environment, and then we'd have all these tabs up in Chrome. The tabs are already about that size anyway, right? And then we would just cycle through these tabs until all the tests are finished. That was really easy to miss a test suite. It was hard to know, what the status was. It was tedious. So now we have a bot that puts everything into Slack for us. It will go out, reach out to all these different places and pull everything into Slack. So we've just got one place to monitor, one place to check. We've got 4 statuses here. We've got tests that are waiting to be run, tests that are currently running, tests that are passed, and tests that have failed. We're mostly interested in the tests that have failed. So we don't really care too much about the tests that are passed. We're really happy, right? Test passed, good. But we're more interested in the tests that have failed. You see here I've got 3 test suites that have failed. They're the ones that need action. I need to go and have a look at them. Normally it's a Selenium related test. They can be a bit flaky. When we make deployments into production, we send out notifications as well. This is into our release channel. This is a bit of an audit, but it means that everybody knows what's happening, what changes are going into production, and if something goes wrong, and then we've got a reference, we can go back through and say, well, the problem happened around this time, this is when this deployment happened, there's something in here, and that gives us a head start on what we can look for. Not only that, we put out links. We use Raygun for exception management. So all our exceptions go into Raygun, and we put out quick handy links there. So if we're concerned about a particular area, as it's right there, you just click on it, it opens up browser, you can go and have a look at that area. So it's a lot of really helpful handy links in there. And we have a bunch of other stuff. We have heartbeats, so this tests our API. If our API works fine, and then it just spits out a message to say, yeah, okay, I've done my job, and everything's okay. If it fails, and then it's going to raise a PagerDuty alert and get somebody immediately onto it to have a look at it. Same with exceptions. Again, this is to get everything into one place, so we don't have to go hunting around everywhere. Every time there's an exception that happens, it'll get sent from Raygun into Slack so that we can go and have a look at it. Very similar process with logs. We've got triggers on certain logs that are important to us that could be causing a problem, and that'll trigger the message to come into Slack as well. You're probably getting a sense of feeling here that This is all around communication. It's all around sort of monitoring, making sure that everything's sort of coming into a central location that is really easy for us to go and find the information we need, because everything's been sucked in from all these different systems and been put into this one place. On the whole, that's the majority of what our automation does. It's to give us the information that we need to be able to do our job successfully. Same as metrics. So I said before, we have thousands of metrics go out, and we use a system called Librado to have a look at it. I really like it. It's got like colors and things. And it gives you an indication of performance stats and how things are working. So if something goes wrong, you know straight away, and this is where we can set up set up alerts. So if something happens, unexpected happens, it will generate a PagerDuty call. We also have community-based bots. For a period of time, we're growing at quite a rapid rate, and it wasn't unusual at that time to say good morning to somebody and you had no idea who they were, or you'd say go and talk to somebody, and you're like, who's that? All right, so we just created this Pony Hipsters bot. It's more of a community thing. It lets us know who people are, so you can type in the command with the person's name, and it'll tell you who they are, what they do, who their manager is, what team they're in, information like that. Or you can do it for a team, so you can see all the members of a team, and it's just really a little helper thing. We have security bots. So I always forget my password. I don't forget my password. I forget to reset my password when it's due. And so we have this nag that comes in about when your password is due to expire, and it comes in and reminds us in Slate to go and do that. So now when I forget, I get the admin guys really, really angry with me because I've had lots of alerts and warnings. All right, this is my favorite one, C3PR. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time on it, and I'm going to finish on this one. So when we ship to production, as you know, we do trunk-based development. Everything's on the master branch, and when it's on the master branch, it's going out into production. And we don't do this one at a time because it's far too slow. So what we'll do is we'll get a bunch of changes together, and we'll ship those changes into production. And we need some way to manage these deployments into production. It's very similar to the Spotify model, if you've ever seen those Spotify videos. And we built a bot called C3PR that lets us do this. And it's probably easier if I just give you a quick demo. I was going to do a real life demo of this because it's kind of fun, because it screws up and then everyone laughs at me. But we're getting low on time, so what I'll do is I'll just quickly go through this video and talk you through this and show you what we do. Now, we have kind of a mixed terminology. So C3PR is a train with carriages that we ship into production. So we have internal conflict around whether we're a boat or a train. But if you can get over that, right, so this was an empty train. Our persistent storage is the channel topic because that's all we needed. It's getting, the limit on that's getting a bit too small. We're looking at options now to go and fix that. But this was all we needed at the time. So instead of getting external storage, we just chucked it in the topic in Slack. And this is the train. So at the moment, I'm the only one on it. There's one carriage, and we're in a roll call state. We can add another person. So we're going to add test one. So if we take a look at that, so now we have two carriages. So I'm in the first, test one is in the second. We can add people to the same carriage. So we're just adding test two to my carriage. So now there's two people in my carriage. When somebody joins the carriage, by convention, what we'll do is we'll go and create a thread on the notification, and that person will say what changes they're going to be putting in. So test two here is just telling me that they're just going to add a feature flag to it. By convention as well, the person in the front of the carriage, the name in the front of the carriage is the driver of that carriage. They're responsible to make sure that all the tests are passing. They're the ones that actually do the deployment into production. They make sure that everything's okay if there's an issue, and then they coordinate the fix for it. They don't have to do the fix, but they need to make sure that everything is okay. So we'll just quickly add a new person. So that I can demonstrate kicking off test 1. You have to be kind of careful there. Kicking is a lot of fun. I really enjoy it, but it has real life consequences. Right, so the idea is, and we're moving into the stage, we've got the train set up. The roll call stage is the one where everybody is getting ready. Is everybody at their desk? Is there sufficient testing resource? Is everybody ready to go? Are your PRs all code reviewed? Are you in a state where you can actually ship this change into production? And then what we do is we'll just dot ready. And once everybody in that carriage has dot readied, just to indicate that they're ready to go, it then moves into a merging state. And everybody can then start to merge in their changes. So they go into their PR and GitHub, and then they'll merge the change into the master branch. When they merge their change, they'll get a notification come up in here, but because this is just a demo, we're not going to see that at the moment. Once you've merged all your changes, and then you will go and ready again, and that moves us into the QA state. When it goes into the QA state, it automatically kicks off the build. So it'll go and build the application, it will automatically deploy it to our QA environment, and then it will automatically trigger all the tests. All that information will come into here as well. So all that automated tests, results, and everything, that all comes into here so that you can monitor everything in our release channel. So once all the tests are passed and everything in QA is okay, once you've done your exploratory testing and that's all okay, and then you're ready again. Once everybody is ready, it will then move into production state, and this means that you can then go and ship it into production. And so what we're doing here is we put out some helper stuff. So we have the runbook that tells us what we actually need to do, how we operate Octopus, how we get changes into production. And then we've got dashboards for our metrics. So we have business, developer, and operations dashboards. And we've got handy links in here so that we can just go straight to them and monitor the changes to make sure that once your deployment's in production, that everything is still okay. Once it's been shipped to production, you'll come in and you've done any kind of production testing you need to do, you'll come in and ready again. Once everybody is ready, and then that carriage will disappear, the next carriage will be the first one, they'll be in a roll call state, and it moves over to them, and then they can start deploying their stuff. Like I say, this happens probably every hour and a half, something like that. And this is how we're coordinating all our changes into production. This is a slide you want, if you want to photograph or anything. That's me done. So we've gone through our culture, which forms the bedrock of everything that we do, gone through a few of our processes, and then some of the automation that helps enable that and get rid of all the boring stuff. So we've got a few minutes for questions, if you have any. Yep, right at the back. Right, so the question was, is there too much noise in Slack? Because we've got a lot of automation going in here. Is there too much noise going into Slack so that you miss certain things? A lot of the stuff that I've gone through today, you don't care. If you're not on that train, if you're not on that carriage and you're not shipping, you're not terribly interested in all that noise. So in that particular instance, when you go into the shipper, when your train comes up, it starts notifying you directly, and that's when you know to go in, and that's when you need to start taking attention. If you're shipping, you don't go away for an hour and leave it. You're constantly there. The other things are The other automation things, if it's really important, and then we'll set up a notification, so it will tag you to make sure that you go and have a look at it. And that's primarily because of the noise. Again, we have to be really careful because we could do that too much, you know, and if you start getting too many of these direct notifications, you're going to start ignoring them as well. So you get blinded by the noise. So you saw there I had like 43 forgotten flags. So Flaggy McNagface was saying you got all this stuff. And if I've got a lot of that, and then you tend to say, oh, I'll deal with that tomorrow, and you kind of ignore it. So the idea is to keep on top of that, which helps keep the noise down. We do have a problem with a lot of communication going into Slack, because we do use Slack for conversations with everything. That is a very real problem that we're trying to deal with at the moment. So how do we cater for that? How do we know what's important that we need to go and look at? And we're putting in kind of conventions and policies in place at the moment, but that is, the Slack noise is becoming a problem. But I think for your question, for the automated stuff, it's not so much of a problem because we can fine tune that. You were next, I think.
Yeah, so on the Blameless post-mortem, you showed us, you had like red and green labels. Does that mean anything?
So on the Blameless post-mortem chart, there were red and green labels. I obviously didn't blur them enough. Each post-mortem is different, and you highlight the information that's important. In this particular one, they indicated when the system was up and when it was down. So when it was red, obviously the system was down. And that was really important for this particular post-mortem and that particular timeline. But essentially, you can put anything in there. There are a few kind of conventions, but it's really lightweight because we're more interested in getting the information out than having some kind of enforced standardization around it. The post-mortems are reviewed as well. So we have a review process and make sure that they, to a certain degree, they are consistent, but it's more that the right information is written in there, that we are actually getting the right learnings from it. If we're not learning from it, there's no point doing it. Yep, on at the back. How under 100, between 50 and 100. Let's say. I don't know how commercially sensitive it is because we're just getting onto, we're talking about going into different stock markets and stuff, and we've been warned about giving away information like that. But it's more than 50. It's a sizable team. When I started, there was 5 or 6. Yeah. Right, so the question was, how do we invest time into building all this automation and these processes when it's distracting us from actually doing the feature work? That's a really good question. That's always a struggle, no matter what we do, is because the product team always want features. You know, they're not terribly interested in the other stuff. They want to get features out. The sales team want to get features out. And, you know, sales team have promised something that we now need to write and deliver. And we have this contention, of course, with trying to do engineering processes. But by building this, it enables us to work a lot faster and a lot safer. And so there's a lot of value in it. And our product team understand that. And so we are able to have this negotiation to say, if we delay starting on this feature for a couple of weeks to enable us to build this automation or build these integrations in 6 or 12 months' time, we're going to be working so much more efficiently, so much better, and we can demonstrate the value to that. It's getting easier now. We have the history of doing this, and so it makes it a bit easier to sell it to them. But our product team, thankfully, are really understanding and help us get that through. We've also recently implemented innovation time. I say recently, it's probably about 6 months ago, and that means one day a fortnight you can spend on innovation. So if you see a gap, or if you see something that you could write that would help improve processes, help improve something at Pushpay, ideally as well, help you learn something new. So if you want to play with a new feature in AWS, and you can say, oh, I could build this new automation thing in this new feature in AWS, you can spend your innovation time to be able to do that. and slowly get these changes in. Yep.
I mean, there are some well-known techniques when you do postmortem, like 5 whys or RCA, root cause analysis. Do you dig into that kind of thing?
Sorry, if you had to.
There are some good tools to do postmortem.
So why don't we do the 5 whys?
So you know that 5 why technique, for example.
Yep.
Like why did it happen, why did it happen, did both you use that kind of thing? The other things, and use one or something where like both reviews part of your definition of that.
So I think, if I understand the question correctly, so when we do our Blameless post-mortem, do we implement techniques such as the 5 whys? So if you're not aware, if you ask why 5 times and then you get to the root cause, the root cause is generally a person to blame, and we don't want to do that. We're more interested in how can we make our systems better and more robust. So we purposely don't do the 5 whys. We do very similar techniques, but we look at what happened and how can we stop this? How can we implement some automated process to stop this from happening again? And I think it's quite subtle, the difference, but the difference is the change from culture from being a blameless type thing, who do we find to blame, to how do we fix this? It doesn't really matter what the cause was, how do we stop this from happening? I hope that answered it. Yep.
I suppose even if you don't blame somebody, your behaviour is quite normal for people to kind of go around and talk about, such and such stuff up the database this day. How do you discourage that kind of conversation from happening, in a team of that size?
So if I understand that right, how do we stop sort of snide conversations about people breaking things? The blameless thing is something the whole team is brought into, because everybody makes mistakes, and if you're going to do snide comments about somebody else who's done that thing, and then you're going to get that back on you as well. We really encourage people talking about these issues, but we promoted to do it in a positive environment, and the way you talk about it is in these Slack channels, or it could be at the water cooler, but we all have, I think it's more a personal belief that we're all trying to improve, we're all trying to do better, and so we work in a very collaborative environment, and we're all trying to improve ourselves and each other, and I think that's a very real risk that it could happen, but it hasn't happened yet, and I think as soon as any kind of evidence that it would, and then we would stifle it, we'd jump on it straight away. Anyway, I've gone 2 minutes over. Thank you very much for coming, and enjoy the conference.